Okay, thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Evan Clark. I'm Executive Director of Atheists United. We're a Los Angeles-based nonprofit that's been working in California since 1982.
Wow.
History actually goes back a few years before that, back when we were an American Atheist chapter before we became independent. So since the 70s, we've been kind of LA's atheist group. But I wasn't born until the late 80s. So I'm here to speak to you about the youth movement. And my story starts with college. I started a secular student alliance at a little school in Thousand Oaks, California called California Lutheran University. And from there, got involved with student government, was their first atheist student body president, and then got involved with the National Secular Student Alliance and have been on their board of directors for the past 10 years. And then in and out of that time, I've been helping lead atheist communities around the country. I've helped atheists run for Congress in Arizona. I've been launching podcasts and doing all types of different secular, humanist, and atheist projects. And so I'm going to try to condense what is far too much information that I've picked up, mostly looking at our movement and all of these groups and all of these projects from what is usually the youth perspective. I'm now 32. I used to be the youngest person in every group I would enter. I'm still younger than 95% of people in most of the groups politically and community that I enter right now. So I still have a little bit of authority left, but I'm a few years away from losing it. And there's a lot of cool people coming up behind me that if I had more time, I would take the time to highlight. So we're gonna go through a bunch today. Again, I'm trying to condense some core ideas, and we're just gonna focus on those. I'm sure in the Q&A we'll branch off and we'll go in a million different directions, but I really just have a few core ideas I want to focus on for this presentation, and we'll see where that takes us. But before we started, huge caveats we have to address. The first one is an obvious one, but it needs to be said. Young people are not a monolith. Like, they are diverse. And by diverse, I mean radically diverse. This is the most racially diverse group of people in American history. We're talking about more cultures and more languages than any group before them. We also have the most educated generation of young people in American history. Almost 40% of millennials, remember, millennials are now in their mid to late 20s, going into their mid to late 40s. Millennials, about 40% of them have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's almost twice as much as 40 years before them. And then young people are the least religious generation in American history. This, I could talk for ages about what it means, how that actually breaks down. But one simple way to think about that is college campuses in the 1980s, about 10% of college students identified as no religious preference on surveys. Today, that number is over 33%, which means in just 40 years, we have tripled the percentage of students on campuses that don't identify as religious, which means 1 in 3, like 33% is 1 in 3 people on a college campus don't identify that. And that's the average, which means if you go to some campuses, especially in some more urban areas, you have much, much higher numbers. I heard research that USC might even be over 50% these days in our backyard here in Los Angeles. So those are some caveats I want to throw out there, and why, even as I talk about young people now, it's changing very quickly. And this should always be thought through a lens of extra diversity. Now, one of the biggest problems, and why we're having this talk to begin with, is we have a youth attendance problems in most atheist and humanist communities around the country. And the first thing I want to say is that is not unique to atheism. If you talk to most mainline church leaders across the United States today, they're having the exact same problem. If you talk to a lot of political organizations, depending on who they are, they're also having the same problem. This is a multifaceted problem, and I don't have time to get into why all of those, all the different factors that are leading to different youth engagement than maybe 40 or 100 years ago that you would have saw in groups. But I will just quickly mention a few, or one big one, and then I'll send you a place you can look to research more. So the biggest thing I want to note is we're going through possibly the biggest communication revolution in the history of the world right now. Facebook only past MySpace, I think 14 years ago, is the biggest social network, and MySpace and Facebook were teeny in comparison to what like a Facebook or Instagram or Twitter is today. And those platforms are evolving each year and new ones are popping up. Like WhatsApp didn't exist a few years ago. TikTok didn't exist a few years ago. And this revolution means the way we communicate, where we communicate, who we're communicating with is evolving like never before. I mean, I would assume most of you had never used Zoom more than a year ago. This is a communication platform revolution that we are having our meetings in this way now today. And this is only going to continue. Technology is moving so exponentially quick, and we're really just catching up. And our physical communities, places we used to organize around and center our neighborhoods around, are dealing with the trauma that comes from that quick transition. So there's an author I'd recommend, Chris Stedman. He spoke to our group a few months back, wrote a book called IRL, Finding Realness, Meaning, and Belonging in Our Digital Lives. And I think this is a great resource to talk about how, especially young people, are moving a lot of their community online these days. We're kind of noticing the digital life of adults and how that's reshaping a lot of the institutions like churches and atheist groups that we used to find a lot of meaning and community in. So I would recommend people check that out. Okay, let's hop into it. Let's start with the word movement. So this was titled How to Build an Exciting and Youthful Atheist Movement. I feel like the natural question would be, what the heck is the atheist movement? I don't have an hour and a half to talk through all the possible definitions for what the atheist movement is, if we're even a movement, which is a great political conversation. But I can speak quickly to the difference between kind of political movement and community organizations, because this is where I'm going to split a bit. And I would give a different talk if I was talking about how to build just a political movement. Now, the atheist movement as a whole, probably, or the secular movement or the humanist movement, they're not quite interchangeable, but they're pretty close. So I'm going to use them interchangeably for this talk. They are mostly political movements that have political goals. And if you are a political movement, you're generally a very large group of people. You want as many supporters as possible. You want to be able to lobby. You want to be able to get media and attention. And that means you have to have a diverse coalition of people. The best way to change things in a democracy, other than being a billionaire, is to have very large coalitions of people that can work together towards action. Communities, on the other hand, kind of have slightly different goals. For a community to succeed, you often want like-minded people, which means they're inherently smaller. You're being selective. Now, I hear a lot from a lot of leaders that we're a radically inclusive group and we want all people. And I want to be the bearer of bad news. That's a terrible way to build a successful community. We've all heard the phrase that if you try to make everyone happy, you're going to fail. Like you can't possibly ever make everyone happy. The same goes for community building. I think for many years we've been protecting too large and too broad a range of people as our membership and our focus. And what we've actually made is kind of weak, shallow communities that don't know what they stand for. A really good community has people who mostly share the same values, language, ideas, rituals. And we'll get into why in a little bit when we talk about what people gather for. But yeah, it's kind of an inverse relationship between organization size and scope. So the more people you're working to please, the fewer things you can agree on. And the less people you're working to please, the more things you will agree on. It's intuitive when you explain it that way, but I get to explain this a lot to leaders. Okay, so I'm going to focus today on community building. And my argument here is strong communities is how we're going to build the most successful political movement. I have a grassroots organizing background politically, and that's what I truly believe is the best long-term plan for how to make change in society. So when thinking about community building, and again, I'm going to talk about this through a youth lens, but what's beautiful is this applies for everyone. It really doesn't matter if you're young or not. Everything I'm going to tell you today just applies for all people. But now you're just going to think about it through a youth lens for this talk. So the three things we're going to cover is how to engage people's interests, how to support their needs, and how to inspire their dreams. Again, I could probably focus on different ways of wording this or find a fourth or fifth for this, but for this talk, we're just going to focus on these three, okay? Okay, so first, engage. What this means is finding what people like. What do they like to do? What do they like to spend their time on? What do they think about most days? Today I was going back and forth with my girlfriend about ideas for like, what are fun things that we do when we were in our 20s? And we just started spitballing: movies, hiking, bar trivia, board games, beach volleyball, camping, sports, arts and crafts, political rallies. I mean, you could make this list for yourself and you've got an idea of somebody who probably matches your identity. You know, young people might congregate a little bit more towards beach volleyball than the retirement community. But that's it. That's all you have to think about when thinking about young people. Okay, where are they currently congregating? What are they currently spending their money on? Where are they currently spending their time? As a community, you can engage all of these. You can host beach volleyball. You can do trips to amusement parks. You can have themed parties. I really want you to think about how to engage the places and the ideas and the interests of the people as they are. Don't try to change them. Don't try to conform them to your, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a retirement board game that I don't play. A bingo. Don't bring them to bingo. Like, let's do, you know, if they play Texas Hold'em, hold a Texas Hold'em night. Okay, this one's easy. This is the simplest of the three I'm going to talk about. Second is support. Now, this gets to the heart of why communities exist. And this is really, really important and where I think a lot of us go astray. So, I mean, the first part's obvious. Different ages have different needs, and sometimes it's best to segregate based on those. Now, I know when we talk about community, we're always trying to not segregate. We're trying to be like inclusive for all and have programming for all. But this is actually something we do in most places in society, right? Like universities host adult learning classes because adults have different schedules than students. Senior living facilities are set up for people who have the same medical needs and need to be put in the same place or want to share life and community with like-minded people. Churches, I mean, most of us come from churches in our background. They literally break off the young people so they can do a youth program. They do that because their main program isn't that good for young people, especially like high school age or younger. We can do the same exact thing. We don't have to force everyone into the same programs all the time. Okay, but you know, young people especially are trying to find their tribe. They're trying to find their language. They're trying to find their political identity. If you can put yourself into your mind when you were in your teens and your 20s and going into your 30s, right? Like there's a lot of growth that's going on. And I think one of the big mistakes we make as leaders is we hear people say, I want belonging, I want community. And we go, yeah, okay, we'll give you belonging and we'll give you community. But what they say is slightly different than what they need. What most people need is transformation. They want to grow as a human being. They want help figuring out language for their values and their politics and their identity. I can't tell you how many people enter our community and have no idea if they're a humanist or an agnostic or an atheist or a skeptic. We can help them. Same thing with their emotional, professional, and intellectual needs. We're really good at intellectual needs most of the time. Groups like Atheists United and Atheists of San Jose, like we've been hosting speakers since our founding. And most of our speakers are really smart and talk about smart topics. But are we addressing emotional needs? Are we addressing their professional needs? Are we helping them network? Are we helping them after a crisis? I mean, this is something that churches often do far better than us. Sometimes because a pastor got pastoral care training, sometimes because they've been there for 100 years and the families know everyone. So when someone gets sick, they know exactly how to help them in that instance. But we can build deeper bonds in that sense, and we can support people emotionally there. What about community and connection? Are we helping people network? Are we helping people organize for the politics or the action? You know, if someone's being kicked out of their apartment because of a rent hike, are we there to help? Or do we say we're all individuals? We hope you do okay. Communities usually come together for each other. And if we're going to build strong, deep communities, I think we have to step up better here. And then another need we have as human beings is some level of rituals. Everyone has different scale of need on this one. There's a lot of atheists that are rejectionists of a lot of rituals, especially if they look, feel, or smell anything like a religious ritual. but most people want to find places that they can celebrate together. They find places they can commiserate together. They find, funerals, life-changing moments. And ultimately, we want to express, whether this be art or singing. Our choir probably has the youngest concentration of people in our entire organization here in Los Angeles. And I think it's because it's one of the few places where you can just truly express yourself and be playful. And it's not about your brain all the time solving a philosophical problem. It's about you finding your expression. Okay, let's keep moving. And then this is the hardest one and possibly the biggest one. It's how to inspire people's dreams. So quick story, I founded the Humanist community of Ventura County in 2012. There was a guy named Paul Schmier who found the interests of young people. He heard there was a conference happening at our university, a student-focused conference, and he attended. And then he met me and he thought we were doing cool things. And he decided, how about I pay for your pizza at your meetings for the next year? Just some local guy who decided to pay for all of our pizza. He found an interest we had, food at our meetings, and he tried to help us with that. That built an awesome connection. So I started chatting with Paul. And then when I got out of school, I called him up and I said, I want to keep doing community building. I want to build a humanist community, but off campus now. And him and I came together and founded the Humanist community of Ventura County. But one of the things we ran into after our second meeting, where we brought together a bunch of people we knew, we had about 10 people, we gathered at his house. And we did what most people do. We all went around the room and said like, well, what do you want to do with this group? And the first person would be like, well, I want a place to raise my kids. And the next person would be like, I really want intellectual talks. And the next person, and then the next person, and then the next person. And it was great. We took a bunch of notes. We were really excited. And then we came back 2 weeks later, and we started doing the exact same thing. We were just like going to get trapped in this loop of like not quite sure how to decide where to go. And then finally, a guy who had been involved with Atheists United and larger national atheist organizations for like 15 years, who happened to be attending, he took me aside and he said, Evan, you're doing this all wrong. If you were a young, leader of a church, if you were trying to launch a church, you would never ask everyone else what they want to do. What you would say is, I have a vision. I have this really exciting vision for where I want to take a community. Here's just some ideas I have, but we need to flesh it out. And I need you to help me with my vision. He said, you say that and you'll have us for the next few years. And that's what we did. We immediately flipped our messaging and we started talking about all the things we wanted to do with this community. And that got people excited. Suddenly they wanted to follow. I always heard since I was 19 and first started talking to atheist leaders, like herding atheists is like herding cats. It's not. If you feed cats, they come running. We need to find the things that feed them. And vision for community is one of those. Second would be an audacious goal. This is something in entrepreneur speak. They usually say like a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG. And they are something that is tangible, but in the distance that everyone can kind of focus on together. The most famous example is Kennedy and the space program. We will land a man on the moon by the end of the decade, right? Now, we can do that as community organizations and community leaders. And so that's something we started doing with the Humanist community in Ventura County. We started saying that we want to have a building similar to a church or a community center. We want to have our own building in this city, and this group is going to be the one that founds it. We didn't know what we would do with the building, how we would afford the building. We didn't have any plans for that, but we set this massive, massive goal, and people started just going, I get it, okay, I could see it. I mean, we had people who joined some of our events, disappeared for a year and a half, and then came back, and they'd start asking, like, how's the progress on the building? Well, we can set these goals, and it will focus your community. And then the last part is how to be unforgettable. And what I mean by this is, how can we leave lasting experiences in people's mind? I don't know if any of you have been to like an overnight summer camp that changed your life, or maybe you have gone through a recovery program, or you had a teacher in high school or college that you'll never forget because they provided an unforgettable, life-changing, or transformational experience of some kind. We are completely capable of doing this in our communities. They can be everything from really cool parties at our solstice events to really meaningful programs or services, like a recovering from religion program for people who have religious trauma. We have unique experiences and identities that come through our communities, and I think we need to address those. Young people especially are looking for community when they come out of college, when they're finding their first jobs, when they move to new cities. And these can be great ways to hook them on your community rather than have to constantly sell them. Cool. Let's keep moving. So I'm going to quickly talk about some of the things we're doing at Atheists United. We've been launching a bunch of new programs over the past year and a half, and I'm going to walk through a few of those really quickly before I finish up with a few tips on how to work and talk to young people. This is a new program we started envisioning in 2009, and we're going to launch in March of 2020. I don't know if you all heard what happened in March, but a pandemic swept the world, so we had to cancel it. But we wanted to plan a overnight camping trip in Death Valley to look at the stars with an astronomer. When I started telling people publicly about this event, I've never seen people's eyeballs light up more. This is so different than the programming we normally do. And I had people, especially under 40, going like, whoa, I didn't know there were events like that we could attend in the atheist world. I had a friend in Florida who was going to fly out for this event. We can do these. This is completely possible. It is not hard to plan a camping trip. We have rescheduled. We're now planning for November 6th, 2020. We're going to try to reserve up to 50 spots. If you would like to join us, you're welcome to, but you can do more exciting and interesting events like this. For us, we doubled the amount of volunteer activities we're doing in our community. We had a sneaking suspicion that this was a program. These were the type of programs that especially young people would be excited by. And so we got involved. One of our volunteers connected with the LA Food Bank, and they were looking for groups to help with emergency food distribution since COVID hit. And we were able to use the parking lot of the building we rent from as a food distribution site. We started in June of last year, and we are now averaging 100 families every month that we're giving food out to, probably 1,000 to 2,000 pounds of food. If the reports are right, we've probably given out almost over $40,000 worth of food in the past 10 months. And my favorite part is we're getting a lot of young volunteers, people who have never been to any of our other events before, but they show up at this event. Young people are looking for places to volunteer. It's one of those needs that they have. They need community programs, and volunteering is one of the most communal program that exists in society. People want to give back. They want to feel like they're a part of something bigger. Offering more volunteer programs does that. We've launched a few other volunteer programs, but this is the one that has the best photo, so I like to talk about this one. We have been doing, we just launched a Recovering from Religion chapter in April. This is very exciting. If you think about the needs that are specific to our community, probably more than any other community in the world, we have a lot of people who have religious trauma. We have a lot of people who don't have spaces to talk about their deconversion or escape from religious communities, religious language. And there's a process that many people go through. What we found the more we talk about it is that if we don't create a space for this, we find that our whole group becomes a recovering from religion space, even when we're trying to talk about other things. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you want to talk about religion more than if that's your thing, if you want to talk about religion all the time, you should go to an atheist group in America. I feel like that's what we talk about 90% of the time. And yet when you think about community, when I think about community, atheism isn't a need the way like helping raise a kid is a need, or helping me find language for my values is a need, or helping me find rituals and people for me to spend time with is a need. You know, community needs are often very separate than personal needs in that sense. And I find that we've gotten very hooked on the like intellectual, philosophical need to explore theism and atheism. And that was a lot of our groups in their foundings, because I think a lot of people were recovering from religion that founded our groups. Well, now we're seeing kids that are growing up on college campuses where 1/3 of people to half of people aren't religious. They're not even talking about religion on some of those campuses. And so our groups are probably going to evolve to match the needs of those young people, but we still need space for those that are growing up in Kentucky and were kicked out of their house, or have parents that have no idea that they're non-religious and they're scared about going home for Thanksgiving. A Recovering from Religion chapter is a great way to do that. Any of you can start one of these in your city. Recovering from Religion is a national organization. They have a whole program set up, and you can just, you or some of your volunteers can do one of their trainings, and then you've got a chapter. They're doing everything virtually right now, but they do encourage you to do in-person meetings once that's allowable again, which will be starting, I think, in July. More meetups. So a unique thing about Atheists United in Los Angeles, we've always had a really diverse range of what we call meetups. We have meetup.coms where we host them all, but these are usually affinity style groups. These are groups that have specific focuses or things they like to do together. And we just started launching way more of them. We find that if you can put like-minded people together, they will continue to gather together. And so we found people who wanted to read the same books. We had a social justice book club that got started. We have people that want to play music together. A drum circle got started. This is a photo of, this is one of the like 2 in-person events we did, food distribution being the other one during the pandemic. We did a few drum circles with an instructor in LA. We have a knitting group that got started, which is cleverly called Atheists United. And yeah, this is an opportunity. This is a feature, not a bug of community, is moving people into smaller and smaller groups. I really, really, really want to encourage people to get excited, not fear a bunch of small groups getting started. I think this is our future. We're going to have a lot of affinity groups. And the reason for that is because there's no right way to do atheism. There's no holy book. There's no pastor telling us exactly how to do it. So we can organize any way we want. Another thing we did is we launched a scholarship program. So we partnered with the Secular Student Alliance. They manage a scholarship program, and any local group in the country who can raise $1,000 can host a scholarship locally. We actually only came up with 500, and we partnered with 2 other groups this year, Santa Barbara Humanists and the Inland Empire Atheists, Agnostics, and Humanists on a $1,000 scholarship for Southern California students. I think we got up to 1,400 actually. This is another way to connect and support and stand for youth issues. A nice feature of this, which you should know as a leader of a group, is they give you a list of all the people who applied for it. You can then add that to your mailing list. So if you have 100 people sign up for the Palo Alto Secular Scholarship hosted by Atheist Abbey, you get the names of all those people, and maybe they start joining your events because you get to promote those to them. And then our most recent one, we're hoping to launch by July, is a new youth group. We have a high school student that we've been in contact with, and we're going to support her in launching a youth group called Evolve Youth Group here in Los Angeles. So we will finally have programming specifically targeting 13 to 18-year-olds in Los Angeles. It'll be an all-inclusive secular youth group for curious and dynamic students. And these are just some of the ones I'm highlighting. We're also working on a smart recovery program, which is a drug and alcohol recovery program. We're working on possibly a podcast network so that we can have a larger media outreach, and a new speaker series possibly that could even address younger and more diverse populations that traditionally have been left behind by a lot of our atheist programming. And then there's the classics. We've had a choir. One of the cool things about us in Los Angeles, we have one of the only atheist choirs in the world, and they are going strong. They've continued strong through this pandemic. You know, singing, there's forgetting all the research there is behind singing as an awesome thing people like to do together and how good it is for your brain. We know that there's huge populations of atheists that are really freaked out by singing together. Don't force them to. Let it be one of your subgroups. But what we find is there's a lot of people who still do want to sing together, and we're not offering that for them. We need to ask why. All right, but let's talk about where young people are. They're online. We know this. We're all online these days. But if you want to connect with them, you need to be where they spend their time. Now, this is challenging. If you don't have staff or a lot of volunteers, having a Facebook and Instagram, a YouTube, a Twitter all at once is a lot of work. This might be a good reason to fundraise and hire someone or get a contractor, because you can't get to young people if you can't meet them. We do a lot of our advertising. We've really increased the amount of content we're putting on our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We do not have a TikTok account yet, but we are thinking about it. Discord, Google, blogs, these are all places you want to be thinking about being because young people are definitely there. Second would be other nonprofits and organizations. I hear all the time, young people aren't engaged these days. Young people aren't joining things. Bullshit. They are joining tons of things. They're just not joining the same things you are. You know, if you go to Planned Parenthood advocacy days, if you check out the Secular Student Alliance conference, if you go to an LGBT center, if you go to a Black Lives Matter rally, the average age is more than half under what most of our groups is. There are plenty of young people out there and they're doing tons of stuff. But we need to note some of it's online. They've moved a lot of their advocacy and community building to online spaces. We didn't have 20 years ago, the ability to pull up a Netflix or Skype on my phone and talk to people on the other side of the world or binge something for 7 hours. We're just in a totally new era of communication. But there are organizations that are having success here and we can either replicate or work with them. Most of our groups have value alignment with a Planned Parenthood or an ACLU or an LGBT community center. And we should just start showing up at their events. There's a group in Orange County Humanists, who's trying to work closer with the United Nations group in that area. They've found that most of the leadership of the local United Nations group are millennials. Suddenly they're communicating with a bunch of 30 and 40 somethings that they wouldn't have otherwise. You can do that. The third works for everyone. It still works for young people too, and that's media. You got to get out there. You got to find ways to get in front of them. TV, radio, billboards, podcasts, they all still work. Yeah, they're spending their time on Facebook, but they're reading articles from the Washington Post. You know, if you can get some news, you will get attention from young people. And then finally, I really want to encourage people to push into their own networks. You know someone with kids, you know someone who's in their 40s right now or their 30s right now. And it wouldn't be hard for you in a non-pandemic year to take them out to lunch and ask them what they want in a community. What would it take for them to join your group? Is there anything we're doing that's exciting? Do you know anyone that would be excited in our stuff? Yeah, that's a lot of work. Yes, extroverts might enjoy doing this more than introverts, but this is how you build community. You know, grassroots organizers are not magicians. They just consistently put the work in. And all of these things, you will see grassroots organizers working on all of the time. You can do that. Cool. And then just some quick tips as we wrap it up, move to Q&A. Invite young people to speak. This is a super simple thing. This is something you did with this group and I commend you for it. And I want to encourage you to keep doing it. You can reach out to groups like the Secular Student Alliance or American Atheists and ask, who are other young up and coming leaders, speakers, who are writing the books and the blogs, who's getting attention, who's the YouTubers? Ask them to come visit your group. They're out there. There's plenty. There always has been and there always will be people trying to make their mark on social movements. Ask them to come speak. Treat them like adults. Now, I know this is obvious and I know it's almost patronizing for me to say it, but I've had patronizing comments at me in the 15 years I've been interacting with these communities. I was asked to speak at a group once and then I was lectured about my ums and ahs afterwards. And I was basically like, they were so upset at me because I mispronounced Ayn Rand's name. And anyways, they felt like I was a student they needed to correct, not an adult that they could engage with based on my ideas. That is not inviting. You have to meet them where they are, and that is as adults in your group. Even if they are high schoolers, you want them to fully participate, and that means giving them the respect you would anyone else. And what I mean by that is sometimes we infantilize youth. I think we commoditize the youth. We even talk about them as a product to add to our membership rather than it's obvious they're part of what we do. We need to even stop the language of why aren't the youth here? What, like, they're not some commodity. They are human beings. Okay, award and celebrate young leaders. This is super simple. You can just find the ones that are doing cool work and then throw cash or throw awards at them. I guarantee young people are following other young people and they will notice when you do this. Openly engage the issues young people are concerned about. Now, again, this is something you would learn about if you want to engage the Black community, what are the issues the Black community faces? You want to organize women, women bring a lot of issues with them when they come to our group. You can't ignore sexism and then be talking about inviting women. Like, they go hand in hand. So there are issues that come with young people's identities in our society, whether it be student loan debt or climate change or Black Lives Matter. Most young people are engaging with these, and you can't just ignore those issues and pretend that's not a part of who they are when they come to the group. I've heard over and over and over since I've joined atheist groups, if I try to bring up an issue like feminism or climate change, they go, I don't know if that's an atheist issue. Maybe you should talk about trans rights somewhere else. Like, no, it's part of who I am, and my whole atheist identity needs to be at the table, not just a sliver of it. Okay, make membership accessible. You'll notice a lot of the national organizations do this pretty well now. They offer student discounts or free student attendance for all of their conferences. You can do this for your membership programs and any events that cost money. The stats are really bad on how poor this generation is to any other generation. I think I was reading today that millennials have only 5% of America's wealth, and baby boomers, when they were this age, had 25% of America's wealth. We're going through one of the worst distributions of wealth ever, and young people are getting screwed the hardest. And yeah, we need to help them out. Offer childcare. This is obviously for parents. This is a no-brainer. And then stop promoting sexist and transphobes. We have a lot of leaders in our movement who have done terrible things, said terrible things, and we often have hero worship about them or seem to ignore it. And young people are not ignoring those. They are reading the blogs, and if they're engaged with some of these other issues, they're not going to just get over it. We have classic examples like Michael Shermer, who was, and David Silverman, who were credibly accused of rape. Stop promoting those people. It's really simple. It will help everyone. Okay. That's it. Let's move to Q&A. I really appreciate everyone's time. I really wish I had 10 hours where we could get into all the juicy details of movement building, grassroots organizing, like the youth of today. I was reading about how the Afghanistan war is about to hit 20 years, and it's the longest war in American history, which means anyone born in the past 20 years has not existed when America wasn't at war. I mean, up to 25-year-olds today, I think even a little bit later, have never been in a world where America wasn't at war in Afghanistan. Like, these are the things we have to think about when engaging different generations. They've had different experiences of America than a lot of us did. Okay, thank you.
Wow, well, thank you so much. That was great. A lot of good ideas there. I guess I'd start off with asking, let me see, I guess first matter of procedure, if you want to just jump in, go ahead, just unmute yourself. I'm trying to figure out how to do the hand raise thing, but I can't.
It's under reactions at the bottom.
Under reactions at the bottom of reactions.
The right side.
Evan, you want to take your, yeah, thank you.
No, I don't see a hand raise there. I see.
You click on reactions.
Oh, yeah, but that's not a raise hand. Where's the green raise hand thing? I don't know either.
If you click on reactions, you'll see it.
Yeah, it has that. Click on reactions. There's a bunch of, there's applause and thumbs up and heart and such, but underneath that is a bar that says raise hand.
Not on my screen.
Oh,
I got it. That's all right. We just like school. We can physically raise hands. I can see you all. So if you have questions, we'll just call on you.
Sure. Well, let me start by asking how big is your group?
And so this is an interesting distinction. So again, we started off.
Did you end up getting?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So we started off by talking about political organizations and movements versus community organizations and movements. And this is where Atheists United is complicated. We I think founded with the aspirations of a political movement, but have organized mostly as a community organization. And I think we're heading back towards the political movement building organization. We're moving into a bigger structure. So I'm going to give you info that's going to relate back to community, but a lot of the programming we're heading towards today, the direction we're heading, and our ultimate goals are much more in line with a broader coalition of lots of atheists and humanists and secular groups rather than a very tight-knit community of like-minded people. We have 130-ish members right now in our community. We just launched a new membership program and are about to put a ton of money into marketing that, so we're expecting that to go up. But and those are paid memberships. We have a membership program that we've been doing at Atheists United for years. But again, as a political organization, we're hoping this can be thousands of people, and we can be offering support for atheist groups and community building all over the state of California. But what's interesting is we mostly offer still a lot of community programming. So we have over, I think, 15 groups in our meetup network right now around greater Los Angeles. We have subgroups in San Luis Obispo and Santa Clarita. So right now we've become a bit of an umbrella organization where I think if you were to look at us 20 years ago, we would have been a little LA group.
So that encompasses basically greater LA.
Yeah, yeah, and again, if I'm working on the, like, Tom's on this call too. He's one of our board members. We're working, we're meeting up this weekend even to talk about vision. So that vision section of the talk, where you want like big aspirational vision and you want it to be as clear as possible, we're cleaning that up in our organization. After, you know, we're definitely in a new decade and era of Atheists United, and we're trying to clarify if we're building a community for LA or if we're building a movement for California. My sense is we're heading towards a movement building organization for all of California, and we can be a support organization, a fundraiser, a little bit of everything for groups from Sacramento to San Diego. But we don't have that infrastructure built yet, and the vision language isn't quite out yet. So we can put that back in the box for a second, but that's the teaser of my vision for the organization.
And then what did you end up with your building? You rent something or you own it, or?
Yeah, so Atheists United, we're lucky. Out of all the cities in the country, I think we have the most local paid atheist organizers, essentially. So Atheists United, I work for full-time, and we rent office space from an organization called Center for Inquiry. They're a national organization that has a few buildings around the country. They've had one in LA for 10, 15, 20 years or so. And they have 2 staff members. And then we also have good relations with Sunday Assembly Los Angeles, which also has a full-time staffer. So we're well equipped here in Los Angeles compared to most cities. But yeah, we work really closely with Center for Inquiry.
Anybody else?
I'd like to say something.
Sure.
Yeah, Dick.
Listening to Evan reminds me so much of the Minnesota Atheists. I was at the Atheists United convention probably before Evan was born in Los Angeles. But the Minnesota Atheists are very much like what he is describing and have all these various things. And one of the things that they were doing years ago, and I don't know if they still do, but whenever a public school had a course in comparative religion, they went and spoke to those classes in the public schools. And that was one of their outreach to youth.
Right, right. Yeah, Minnesota Atheists is an awesome group. They've been around for a long time.
Yeah, I'm a proud honorary member.
Nice.
When I
Nice.
moved to California, they made me an honorary member.
Right. But yeah, but again, I do think we need to figure out the distinction between a community group, which each community group's different. Each community group has slightly different rituals, use slightly different identity language, uses slightly different values language, maybe organizes around slightly different things. But occasionally we come together in a really big movement for a few political things. So again, we're positioning Atheists United to be that that bigger movement organization that can bring 30 of us, 100 of us together. But when you think about our local cities, and I think about the future, I don't see one atheist group for San Jose. I see 10. You know, I don't see one humanist group for Sacramento. I see 13, 40, right? I actually think we should have lots of really unique groups, and some talk about their humanism through a radical social justice lens, and some talk about it through a skeptic lens, and some talk about it through a we watch football together lens. You know, like we don't have to have one type of atheism or humanism. We do need to come together for political purposes. We are a marginalized political identity. Atheists are stigmatized in our society. We have unequal representation nationally and locally. We know that the protection of religious equity and secular government is always at stake, and we're always the first ones to get hurt by that. So no matter how diverse this gets, we're probably going to come together politically. But honestly, like whether you celebrate the winter solstice or Darwin Day, like, you know, pick your own group. We don't have to share all of those. If one group likes pink and the other likes purple, like cool, have your own group. I think we've been so small for so long, and we were so worried about having enough people to kind of just have any power. We were scared of those differences. And I think we're heading in a direction now, and there's a critical mass of young people that identify as secular now that you can't put them all in the same box. You go to Berkeley as a secular student and you're organizing for Black Lives Matter your whole time there. Like your experience is so radically different than somebody that grew up in Kentucky and was kicked out of their house for being gay. Like they just have different needs, and we're probably going to have to offer different community. They might want different rituals, you know, even just singing together versus not singing together. Like that can be two groups. That's cool.
So Christine has her hand up. She figured out how to get her hand up. Christine, unmute. Good for you.
I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but let's say you have a group of young people that play volleyball, and Susie has a friend who wants to play volleyball, but she's a Catholic. And so Susie says, oh, who cares? Come on, join us. And finally, this person can be around a bunch of atheists and realize that we don't eat babies for breakfast. So,
but for lunch.
Yeah. So I think it's important to have people that have a religious bent join our group, but I don't know how to advertise to them. How do I get, say, knitters to join?
I think it depends on the group. So this is where the diversity of groups really matters. So when I was a secular student in college, I ran my group at California Lutheran University, and we had to engage the religious. There was no way to be just like an angry atheist group at that university, or we wouldn't have functioned. We had a woman who was planning to go to seminary, Lutheran seminary, who was a diehard Lutheran, and she liked our group because it was the place where she got to ask tough questions, unlike her Lutheran group where they kind of just like push those aside. We had a guy who was agnostic when he came in. He was Muslim when he was graduating college, and he was vice president of our group. And that worked for us. But when we went to the Secular Student Alliance conference and we met groups in Ohio and Alabama, that wouldn't work, because they're creating safe spaces for atheists. They need to protect kind of how atheist the space is and the identity of people, and people trying to find their identity, and people who don't want to be outed as atheists. So I think it depends on the need. If your group is all inclusive and would be totally cool and comfortable playing volleyball with religious people, awesome. But if you have someone in your group that can't do that because there's trauma attached to it or something else, I don't think we should expect that of them. So this comes back to why I want more diversity in our groups, and I want to see different types of groups. Sunday Assembly is such a great, beautiful addition to the tapestry of secular groups, because it's like one of the best places for people to raise kids and to sing together. And we didn't have many spaces for that right now. I think of future spaces that are more like dance and art focused, or are more, I don't know, I could just picture different cultures under this radically broad atheist and humanist umbrella, and interfaith is one of those. I've always identified comfortably in interfaith spaces, but I've met tons of people in our group who they would shout down the religious person. They'd be angry they believe in that. They would feel a need to fight over theism or not. So I guess it's up to you. If you have a group like that, yeah, you can just ask. I find it's not hard. If you're really nice and you hang out with diverse people, like usually you find the nice ones and they want to hang out with you.
That leads me to a chance to make an announcement that I'm going to give a talk to the humanists of Silicon Valley a week from next Sunday. I think it's the 23rd, May 23rd. And the title is Christians 57 Varieties.
Nice.
And
Yeah,
because I have been reacting very much to the attitudes of people in these groups toward religious people.
Yeah. And I mean, the reformation of religion, right? All these 1,000 flavors of ice cream that is Christianity in the United States, like, it's weird because they split over things like belief in angels, or, you know, they split over weird, awkward things. We're splitting over like whether we play beach volleyball or not, or whether we sing together, like whether we like singing religious songs or not. Like these are healthy splits. Theirs are awkward. So I really, you know, if you're a group that plays soccer and happens to be atheist, like I get why you don't necessarily go to all of the lectures we host at Atheists United, but like, cool, do your thing. Join us politically. We're going to need you in the fight against the religious right, but like, do your thing. I think Lisa had her hand up.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to phrase this exactly. I have 4 young adult children from 16 to 27, and we left Mormonism and, you know, just left with no community, and we're like, now we had nothing. And they were totally happy to leave and everything. That worked out great. So I was really active in the Sacramento ex-Mormon group, and I was the one that like stepped up and planned activities and made sure things happened. And like every week I would have something for like adults and kids and like whatever I could come up with, park days, barbecues, whatever. And now in Salt Lake, there doesn't seem to be a lot of that here, and I'm not sure why, or if I just haven't found it. Like, what do you recommend, like a good way to like get started? Or like, it's like I've seen some recovering from religion activities, but those are like mostly adult focused. And yeah. I'm not sure like how to get started. And you know, I work and I got things to do. It's like, what would you recommend?
This is the hardest question, because we're almost always starting with like low experience, low resource, low time, and we're supposed to do something as large as what a church used to offer. Like, right. You know, we don't have 1,000 years or 100 years of money, of resource, of assets like a building. We don't have training for our leaders. I mean, I've been working without pay in most atheist communities for the past 8 years. This is the first time I've been really paid to be an atheist, starting in 2019. And I'm one of 10 in the country at this level, maybe less. And there was no training for me. The best training I maybe could have gotten was to go to seminary. Like, that's what people are, I'm watching young people go to seminary right now to learn how to lead atheist communities. And that's because they're learning stuff, but yeah, I mean, this is the struggle. So my recommendation, sadly, is like, build it and they will come. And I know it's not always true and it eats all of your time in life to do it. But I wish this wasn't true, but most groups revolve around the leadership and energy of a leader. So somebody has to take that role and has to run with it. You know, when we talk about the vision, usually it's like they are the visionary as well. They are communicating constantly where you want to take this, why it exists. Yeah, in a dream world, we all have really good teams and we have lots of resources. Now, starting small is fine. And most of our groups that exist around the country are small, have started small, and they just kind of like, they're a steam engine that keeps going. A few people show up, those people want to keep it alive. And even if people come in and out, it keeps going. I really, really, really think the next stage of evolution, though, is fundraising. We have to start hiring people. So, you know, I think of Atheists United, and we got up to $20,000 a year, $30,000 a year in income pretty regularly. And we probably could have done that for the next 20, 30 years, but we weren't doing the next leap of becoming a $100,000 or $200,000 organization. We were planning very small events. We weren't trying to get 200, 300, 400 people at our events. Our membership, like, how were we going to make the investment to get to new people of a new generation? They did the very risky thing. Somebody died and gave them a lot of money, and they did a very risky thing with that money. They hired me. I mean, this is super risky. I will never say otherwise. Hiring staff is like, they have to raise their salary to keep their job type of thing. And, but the goal is, if I'm successful, and even if I'm not, some other young person at some other organization will be, and that'll be the model we'll all hop on in the future. The goal is we can now build sustainable organizations where you don't have to do all the work. There's actual youth care at these, you know, like I talk about, we have childcare that needs to happen at these programs, but the next question is always, who's going to do it? Like, we don't have enough volunteers most of the time. We don't have the money to pay for a room to put them in. So this is where I think we need to break from the idea that tithing is a bad thing. We just need to break the idea that it's tithing, right? We're giving to causes we care about, and local causes are often the most influential to us, and community is the word for that thing that we gather in. You know, in Mormonism and some other places, they get you to ask for up to 10% sometimes. Like, honestly, what I could do with 1 to 3% of your income, if all of you gave that type of income, like, it's amazing what we could do with these communities. Even as small as we are. Most mainline churches around the United States hover around 100 to 200 people. We're not actually that much smaller than a lot of them. They have huge buildings and paid staff, and they give way more of their money to their community, but they're not radically bigger than us. Yes, some have 500. Yes, that evangelical church down the street has weirdly 6,000 people. But they address the engagement needs we were talking about, the interest needs we were talking about. You know, the reason I see evangelicals growing and the mainline's not is because they've solved some of the concerns I brought up today. They are directly finding young people on social media. They're finding the interests they have, and then they're providing the needs that they have, right? They're giving them belonging. They're giving them identity. They're giving them friendship. They're giving them networks. We can do all of that without the bullshit of Noah living 600 years and the earth being 6,000 years old. But anyways, you know, longer rants about community. I wish I had a better answer. I build a really good team around you. Yeah, give a lot of time. Start putting money into it early. Like, you know, again, our student group, even having $50 a month, after 2 years, that was about $2,000. And suddenly, like, we could do something huge as a student group that we never would have been able to do before. And Atheists United, once we're up to 100,000 in income, we've basically quadrupled the size of our programming, our marketing outreach by then. And I guarantee our membership will be so much bigger for it. So sorry, wish there were simpler answers.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I get anything wrong. Like, do something, get started doing something, like anything, and just get going. But also think of the bigger picture, think of money, think of expanding, think of the future. And if
it's not you, fund or support the person that it is. You know, I realize I'm a bit of a rarity. Like, I was a college student body president, right? Like, who puts themselves through that type of like leadership gauntlet? Like, I was trained younger than most people to kind of lead groups, but I really think most people can do this stuff. It's not the hardest thing. Can everyone sustain it? Can everyone like inspire the way you need to? That's a little bit trickier. So you need to learn your strengths and weaknesses quick, support those that can do it. Yeah, I was thinking recently about, oh, I just lost it. Yeah, I'll come back to that thought. Don't worry about it. Okay. Yes, missionaries though. I saw that in the comments. I was reading about the religious right and the far right kind of fascist movements and how they, throughout history, have tried to like impact certain institutions. So like for the past 40 years, the religious right has been sending people into the military because they know that is a powerful institution in our society, and having influence and power there is important. media. They've been creating their own media networks. Like, I think in a political sense, we can and should be thinking that way. We need to have our own media. We need to have our own outreach channels. We need to have influence in every institution in society. That's what power is in a democracy. And yeah, essentially missionaries. You know, I'm arguably a missionary for atheism. Look at me. But yeah, supporting organizations like the Secular Student Alliance is probably your best bet for helping the next generation of secular leaders. They are, you know, I'm one of the few that kind of was able to stay in atheism and humanism, but like there's no jobs for a 20-something coming out of college who they led a group for 3 to 4 years. They know how to market, they know how to publicly speak, they know how to, they know all of the leaders and organizations in the secular world. And yet where, you know, even if they showed up at a lot of our meetings, would we put them in leadership? We should, but you know, oh, well, you've never been to our group before, so why don't you hang back for a year or two? Like, this happens across the country. I started the Humanist community of Ventura County because the local group, Ventura, Free Thinkers of Ventura County, I mean, their average age was like 75, but they were not interested in new ideas and new people. They were just very comfortable where they were. And when I said I might be interested in leadership, they said like, oh, give it 2 years. 2 years to a 20-something is eternity. Yeah. Cool. More questions.
Anyone else?
Well, speaking of missionaries and media, do you have any comments to make about Free Thought Matters that is on television on Sunday mornings from FFRF throughout the country?
Yes, this is great. For those of you that don't know, Freedom from Religion Foundation, they created their own kind of TV show that I believe is on like different public access, or it's small channels around the country. They also broadcast one of their podcasts or that show on a few radio frequencies around the country as well. Yeah, totally. I mean, Los Angeles, Atheists United used to have a regular atheist radio show. In the 1980s, I forget the name of it. I don't know if Fran or Chris knows, but yeah, we used to have a regular show where one of our leaders would go on, I think with another leader, and they would just talk for an hour. It was the local progressive channel. We can and should do that. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. So I really want to build up our infrastructure more. Yeah, I mean, and I'm personally looking, what we're talking about at Atheists United is the up and coming, bigger, cheaper broadcast mediums to get involved with. YouTube, podcasting, TikTok, like these are where a lot of the influencers are today. And we're looking at those. I can't afford to hire a TV crew right now or pay for a radio frequency, but yeah, if you guys want to make a donation, maybe I will. 15, Fran mentioned in the chat, it was a 15-minute talk show segment on KPFK, sorry, down in Los Angeles. Actually, we had a public access TV show too. Now that I think about it, I found a grant for it in our old records in the 80s. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, you've given us a lot of ideas and and incentives, and I hope we can keep up the discussion.
One final note off this, though, is we don't actually have to bend over backwards for young people all the time. So getting back to the point that we should diversify our groups, meaning segment, we should have lots of different flavors of groups in each city. I think in some cases, when we say we want young people, we don't. We want to say we have young people, but we don't really want to actually change what we do in our communities, what we talk about in our communities. I mean, I've walked into a lot of humanist groups and they love each other and they're all retirement age and they talk about what it's like to be in retirement or after their 40 years of careers. And that's awesome. And I really love that they have that. Throwing a 20-something in that conversation does not improve the conversation almost ever. You know, asking, you know, an 80-year-old supporter of our community to come to beach volleyball does not improve the beach volleyball. And that's okay. So I want to emphasize the point I made very early on. To make a good community, you often want to be very focused on the things you all agree on, the things that make you like-minded or like. That will make your group thrive far more than trying to be everything to everyone and actually being pretty weak at everything to everyone. So I appreciate the like intention and care to have young people, but being a really focused group on like 55 and above can be a radically better group sometimes than trying to pretend that you're going to be inviting suddenly to 20 somethings or 30 somethings. You know, one reason I just started a new group in Los Angeles with a guy that just graduated from college, specifically targeting kind of 20-year-olds to 40-year-olds. We recognize there's a specific need for kind of that young professional age. And so we created a group specifically for them. Like, I'm going to age out of that group in 8 years. And that's a good thing. So yeah, if we had longer time, I'll tell you about the stuff we're doing with that one. But we're calling it Curiosity Collective. It's fun.
Richard, you look like you want to jump in.
Oh, yeah. What you just said, Evan, really changed what I was thinking about, because I've been the leader of the Santa Clarita Atheists and Freethinkers for 4 years and 4 months. And all that time I was seeing our age, get grayer and grayer and grayer. And it really became urgent. And I'm in the predicament that represents the future of my group, as I had to step down because family illness and personal illness have just put the kibosh on having anything to do with leading the group. So I'm left the group in the hands of my people who are like 5 years younger than me. And still with that idea that we need young people, but maybe what you just really said is, it sounds more like young people need to build their own,
so
coming up out of their own needs.
And one way to do that is to support them doing it their way.
Okay.
But one of the things I did in 2012, 13, when I founded the Humanist community of Ventura County, I went to, of all organizations, Atheists United at the time. I knew the leader of Atheists United in LA, our previous leader. She'd spoken to my group when I was in college. I went down, I had lunch with her. She was always kind of my historian of the atheist movement. And I said, we're creating this new group in Ventura. It's really exciting. We want to do slightly different things than what all the other groups are doing. We want to be way more community service focused. We want to catch people out of college. We're going to like do all these socials. And she's like, you should affiliate with Atheists United. I was like, okay, should I? Like, I don't know. And she's like, well, you have to change your name to Atheists United. And I was like, no, we like really want this name. We like decided this. We were very intentional about it. Humanism's the brand we were going for. And she's like, well, then you can't affiliate. And I get that that's really a nice rule for their organization at the time, but like that made me not work with Atheists United for the 3 years I ran that group, when all they had to have said was, do whatever you want. We're there for you. We'll support you. Maybe we'll try to raise money for you, but do your thing. I would have worked with them. We would have had a much closer relationship. So that's how I've been organizing since I joined Atheists United, is we keep meeting new groups and new leaders, and we just say like, go do what you're awesome at, make the most incredible group for you. If you want to, again, just be atheists who play soccer, like just be really good at that. We'll support you on how we can do coalition work. We'll find ways maybe we can work together, but like, I think we've policed each other too much. I mean, if you go back 15 years, we would have been fighting over labels like atheist or humanist, and it would have been these, drag out fights over like which label's better. And what a waste of time when we agree on 95, 98% of things. And really, we could have just said, why don't you do your humanist thing? I'll do my atheist thing. They'll do their skeptic thing. And then we'll come together politically every now and then and kick some right-wing ass. So anyways, I love this point. I think this is critical. Like, we have young people, they're going to try new things. We have all types of people. The best way we're seeing in a lot of cities that the Black community is starting like Black non-believer groups. We shouldn't say that that's a bad thing. We should force them into the groups that have existed that have been traditionally white, right? Well, we can think about that for all identities. If they want to create a women's group or an LGBT group or a Black leaders group, like, awesome. How can we support you? How can we go out of our way to make sure you succeed? It'll help all of us. I guarantee it'll help all groups, but this is a bit of a culture change from back when it was hard and we felt competitive because a new group was going to take half our members.
Yeah.
You know, you're reminding me of a couple of things again, and some of these people are probably tired of hearing me talk this way, but I moved to Silicon Valley just from San Francisco, but I moved here 3 years ago, and I went to the Humanist group here, and it was the least inviting group I've ever been to.
Yeah.
And there's a little group that sits together and talks and ignores everybody else. I've watched more and more young people show up. They never come back. and it just amazes me. I sort of forced myself on them. As I mentioned, I'm going to give a talk here now.
Yeah.
But I'm not that easy to get rid of. But the other thing, what you're talking about, the other groups, I started a group 30 years ago in my living room in San Francisco called the Gay and Lesbian Atheists and Humanists, and it is still meeting.
I love that. I'm gonna call you sometime. You're gonna tell me regale me with history, please.
Susan has her hand up. Susan?
Yeah.
This touches on what Dick was saying. I find that people ignore newcomers. And so people have, right? Yeah. People come to the meeting. I mean, in normal times, they've taken the trouble to get themselves ready to drive 30 miles and come to a meeting, and they get totally ignored by everybody else. And then when they leave, they simply leave. Nobody bothers to say goodbye. And I've been trying to encourage people and outright asking people, look, help me. I need greeters and I need people to say goodbye. Yeah. I mean, even Mr. Rogers, I mean, one of my heroes, he said, it's important when people come and it's important when people leave. And so how do I train people to be greeters and goodbyers, for want of a better word, right? And I mean, it's not terrifying, but people feel terrified until they do it a few times. And I'm thinking at this point, what I should be doing is hiring a couple of young people to be greeters and goodbyers for the beginnings and endings of our meetings. So tell me, Evan, what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's a deeper question. I actually think it's probably more about an investment in the larger programs. I mean, I don't mind being in crowds. Again, I'm sure every woman on this call can speak to rooms they've been in when they're one of the only women in the room. And they don't mind it if it's a really good program, if it's like something they really wanted to be there for. I think the problem becomes if it's not a good enough program and then you lack that diversity, it's just kind of doubly uncomfortable. So I find, yes, young people, they honestly check out a lot of our stuff. Every group I've talked to who struggles with young people, they have a few young people that swing by their meetings every month. It's, you know, we do exist online. We have names like Atheists and Humanists that people are Googling and they're very curious about, but our capture rate sucks.
Yeah.
And I think it's not necessarily just because of the greeter or not. Like, I think it's probably more the environment itself. Again, if you were the only Black person coming to an all-white meeting, like, it starts from a place that's less inviting. You already feel a lack of cultural or historical connection. You're nervous about if they're gonna understand or speak about your issues, or if you often have to change. You feel that you have to change, and sometimes do, how you like speak and engage just to be a part of this like culture that the group has set. Some of that is kind of set, and the group, if they've been that way for 5 to 10 years, like, you're probably not going to be able to do heavy lifting on that unless you like lose some people or have new leadership that sets a totally different tone. So like in some ways that's structural, and I don't know that we need to solve it by like forcing young people in. Maybe like giving them their own space is better. Like we have a group that meets at a restaurant once a month, and like they're a great group. They have great discussions. They really like each other, and occasionally young people show up, but like the conversations aren't on topics that always excite them. The table is set up in a way where a newcomer often can only meet one or two people at a time. Yeah, the like greeting before and after is much easier for people that have been seeing each other at that event for 10 years compared to the new person. So you'd have to change the restaurant, you'd have to change the discussion, you'd have to maybe change the leadership and set some norms for it. And if the group's not willing to make those changes, I actually would worry less about the young people. Like that's your solution, is like, say this is a group for people who have been going for a while. Or, you know, like, again, I started reading church planning books because the question Lisa asked earlier about like, how do we do this? And I was like, there's nowhere for me to find out. So I tried reading a church planning book or two. And if you can get through the prayer will solve it all parts, there's a few pointers that they get to. And I think one of the biggest, and this comes up in nonprofit consulting all over the place, people say they want change. They say they want new people or new programs or new money, but they never want to change anything that they're currently doing. It's like asking for magic to happen, right? Like, I don't want to change anything, but I want new results. So I think it's a deeper question. Do we want to change the core structure, the actual norm, the space that it happens in? Or do we want to change the hat we're wearing? So I don't have an easy answer. Yes, it's good if you can have a greeter. Yes, it's good if you can put people on an email list so you can follow up with them. Yes, it's good if you can introduce 2 young people at an event like that, so they're not the only one, but it might be a space that functions better for retirement age people, and that's okay.
Well, let me explain that.
Susan, do you have, sorry.
People of all ages come in. I mean, it's not just young people who get ignored. It's older people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Debbie has her hand up. Let's give her a chance.
Yeah, just super quick. I think that speaks to all diversity. I know this topic was about youth, but like we have lower numbers of women. We have very little Black representation in most our groups. We have LGBT is good there, but not a lot of T most of the time. So like we have a lot more representation we could get by, breaking the norms. Like I've started my business partner who I did a humanist podcast with. We've started to call humanism European humanism. Like we're not talking about how like we have such a like white European, like white American culture, but baked into the structure and founding of a lot of our groups. The reason we don't talk about issues like trans rights or Black Lives Matter in some of our spaces, and that's not atheist. It's like, because it's not white atheists. Like they're talking about Black Lives Matter in Black atheist groups. Sorry, go ahead, Debbie.
Debbie.
Hi. If you want to get people to stay, new people to stay in the group, you have to do a few things, because I've led groups myself. The first thing you have to do is welcome them, and then you have to give them an opportunity at the beginning of the group that everybody says hi and that they're introduced to everybody. And then you have to give them a reason to come back, which means that since they're different, that they are going to teach everybody a different perspective and that they're very valued. Thank you, Dick. And then I hired him to do that.
No.
And no, and the way you can do that is sometimes even give them a little something to do next time, and say, we'll look forward to hearing you talk about your different perspective, something like that, and stay with that person. And then when they leave, towards the end say, how did you like the group? I hope you come back, and that sort of thing. But it's very important for that person to feel that they're going to be an addition to the group, even though they're initially uncomfortable. They might be a little bit uncomfortable. If they know they're uncomfortable, you could even acknowledge that, but say it's so important that you come back because we really want to hear your perspective, or this thing you're going to talk about, this sort of thing. Get to know the person. When the person shows up, don't just welcome them, talk to them and find out what they're about, and until you find something that they can contribute, because they're there for a reason. There's no reason, there's always a reason for people to come, and you just got to hook them to make sure that they realize how needed they are, because people will go where they're needed. All kinds of people go where they're needed.
That's right.
And you can ask them for your help. That's another very big thing, is to say, could you help me with this sort of thing, without being, artificial, because you really do need their help. You're trying to get everybody to help you. So thank you for letting me talk.
That's really great, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Susan, at ACSJ, we used to have a greeter who would, or I thought we did. It was kind of informal. We just sort of asked a few people to act as greeters every time. You don't need to hire someone, do you? It seems like a lot of effort and cost.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've asked and asked, and I have had people promise and then bail without even telling me. It's getting kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
Susan, you need to do it yourself if you're the head of the group.
Sure.
Debbie, let me tell you, I've done it. And the problem is that when our meetings start, we have this cascade of 30 people, and I recognize maybe 20 of them. And of the 10 maybe new people, how many can I engage with?
All of them.
That's a nice answer, but it's not physically possible. I mean, seriously, how can I?
I've done it.
And to bring it back, let's bring it full circle though, just for a second.
Work.
Every group's going to have like a different space or different people or different music in the background, whatever. But I think there's a larger point that I want to hit, because we have a lot of discussion groups and we have a lot of speaker events in atheist and humanist spaces. This is what we're really good at. We took a church model and an academic model and we squished them together, and that's how we've been building our groups for the past 40 years. We kind of took colleges and churches and the scaffolding of church, and we meet on Sundays often with an academic speaker and a Q&A after. It's nice, it's good, it works a lot for most of us. But when I think about, again, belonging versus transformation, if you get somebody to grow because of your group, if you get them to expand their world, take on a new identity, solve their addiction, you've got them hooked for life. I can't emphasize this enough. Our groups often offer really shallow community value. Intellectual progress is great. We all like it, but I have YouTube these days competing with your group. I have my friends who I can Skype on the other side of the world who are competing with your group for intellectual growth. It's good. We still need it. It's part of the equation, but I really think there's other programs we can offer. I really think this camping trip is going to be more transformational than people attending 12 speakers, because they're going to talk about it for 3 years. They're going to try to bring their friends to the next one. I think the Recovering from Religion group could save someone's life. Right? And if we think in those terms, suddenly we have people that will give us all of their money and they will show up to all of our events. I think right now we're getting caught up on greeting because it's an event that only hooks a certain number of people at that high level of transformation. They desperately need and want discussion. I think most of us actually need and want way more than that. And we're testing it out. We do need and want some discussion. We do want some intellectual progress. We do want like-minded people, but I think we want way deeper things too. I think this is why us having good holidays, us having good, rituals of some sort, us having emotional development, pastoral care is this thing we can joke about that pastors do, that they're always meeting with people, they're untrained, they're not psychologists, but they're addressing emotional needs during people's crisis moments. we can offer that and support people in that way. And if we're big enough, maybe we just hire a psychologist or psychiatrist to like work for us, but we can do it better than they do it. But those are human needs. And I think that's how our communities are going to thrive. Political movements, we don't need to do all that stuff. You don't have to have holiday rituals attached to your ACLU. We're just going to bring everyone together. But your local group, the ones that people come to week in, week out, month in, month out. Yeah, I want to challenge people to go further than the discussion, further than a speaker event you show up for, or you say hi to a few people. Maybe if you're lucky, you eat something and then you leave. And then you don't see them for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 3 months. I think we can do a lot more. Some of it's social, which we all know. We've all tried. We've had bar events, or we've had a cookout in a park or something. But what about transformational change? What about drug recovery? What about a camping trip? What about helping their children learn critical thinking? Those are transformational programs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Evan. I really, really appreciate that.
Okay. I personally need to really move on. So I really appreciate the time here. Judith, I don't know, or if we should thank Evan for his time. And
well, I also asked Evan to remind everyone that the Free Thought Weekend, again, is going to happen in October. We think it's going to happen for real. And Evan is going to be doing the leadership role on Saturday, the day before Free Thought Day, on the grounds of the Capitol building in Sacramento. Some of us from the atheist community of San Jose will be there all weekend and participate in what Evan leads us in on Saturday. So we encourage other people to think about going to the Free Thought, California Free Thought Weekend, which is the 20th anniversary this year, very big deal. And maybe going not just for Free Thought Day outdoors, which is a wonderful event, but also for the Saturday events, including Evan's leadership during the day.
Great, yeah, that's nice. As far as ACSJ goes, I don't think we have any formal events planned yet, but we have some things in the pipeline. And I think the next meeting we're going to try to get together personally, if possible.
We're working up to it anyway.
Yeah.
I see this, the meeting's been recorded. How can I make sure I can share this with my group? I really want to.
Okay, yes, the meeting is recorded. Let me.
If I get a copy, I'll send you it.
Okay, I am recording it, and it'll be in the cloud, and I'm going to put my email address in chat right now. Just give me an email and I'll send you the link to the recording, okay?
Thanks, Judith.
Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, so judb@sanjoseatheist.com, correct. Okay, so that's in the chat.
Yeah.
Just contact me if you would like a copy of the cloud recording, and I will send it to you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Ethan.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan.
Oh, thanks,
Ethan,
yeah.
terrific.
Yeah, so nice to meet you all. I really appreciate it. I cannot wait to come up there and actually start hanging out with your groups. We are trying to be a bit of the leaders on advocacy this year and are working with American Atheists. If any of you are interested in being kind of our Northern California network leaders for that, there's a ton coming down the pipeline and we're really excited. I really don't want it to be a Southern California movement. We need you. You're a lot closer to the Capitol. I don't want to have to fly for these things. So appreciate all of your time.
Okay. Yeah, we'll keep in touch for sure. Maybe I'll plan a camping trip.
Yeah. Yosemite's halfway.
Thank everyone for coming. And we're sorry we didn't get to introduce all the people who are new here tonight because we didn't have time. Right. But we often do that in our in-person events, and we hope to do that in the future. We hope to see you again.
Debbie, how can we do you want to give us a talk? I'm trying to engage you. Where are you located, Debbie?
Oh, I'm in Northern Virginia. I'm in here,
all right.
Washington.
Well, I guess you can't really be a member of ACSJ then, but.
Oh, sure she can.
Be an honorary member.
I already dragged Evan into a talk, and Dick, and so a couple of people here have already followed your advice. Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
Everybody's needed. You just have to find out what way.
Yeah. Thank you. All righty.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. See you again.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah. See you, Evan.
Good night. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you, Evan.